My name is Antoinette Jones. I am the sister of Julius Darius Jones, who is currently on Oklahoma's death row. He's been on death row for over 20 years. Um, basically, his case is about, not having enough capital murder lawyers experienced in the state. Also, he had inexperienced counsel. He did not have a jury of peers, and right now he has a a commutation application before the Pardon and Parole Board that we're waiting to hear back whether they will hear his case.
Would you share with us, please, what was the experience like for you and your family when this first happened? And how did you find help? Who helped? How did you build the community around you? And it took a while, didn't it?
It took a long time. So I don't even really know where to begin other than I don't take for granted any amount of media that we get, because there will always be someone that we cannot bring back. But at the same time, we want the truth to come out. We want the real person to be, convicted. Being 13, I didn't know what to do. So we had a lawyer that we had paid for, Mr. Albert Berry, knew what he was doing. He had notes, everything lined up. He said all he needed to do was get Christopher Jordan on the stand. Fast forward a little bit, he ends up passing away. Fast forward to me getting ready to go to college, which is 2003 or 4. So I didn't know what to do other than write letters to Mr. Berryshek, to reach out to Hurricane Carter and his defense team. I don't know what to do, because we went from having a lawyer that knew what he was doing to getting inexperienced counsel and them not taking into account for the notes that our first lawyer had. So, I mean, it goes back to, if you don't have money to properly have a defense, it's really hard to help your loved one. It's nothing but by the grace of God how things have been connecting in the last 3 or 4 years. I will say that it takes a community, and when I say a community, it takes people that care. Like Mr. Keith was saying, it takes people to care and lean in. It definitely takes, like Mr. Keith say, knocking down doors, reaching out to people, talking to people, writing letters, making phone calls. I can't give anybody praise right now other than God, how things are connecting, because with God all things are possible, and how people are leaning in and being touched to continue to reach out and speak out and do their own research. Like our attorney governor said, to do the research. Humbling to know that other people will fight on your behalf, not having had close proximity with this individual, but knowing and feeling that something is not right with this case. Let me speak up and speak out. How more can I help? You definitely need to keep the momentum going. And sometimes it might seem like everything is falling on deaf ears, but if we could wait for 20 years for people to start seeing the truth, just here in Oklahoma, because there were so many people, even some of my family members, they didn't even know all of the key points in Julius's case. And so for the documentary to do just that, and then like it just spread like wildfire, it's humbling. People need to really understand that we, the people, really do have the power. We need to understand about the government and who we are voting in offices in our states. And I can't be more clear when I say, don't just vote, do the research, talk about it in your communities, have small gatherings and group meetings, do a lunch or breakfast, especially after COVID. I'm praying that COVID will be, taken care of and it won't come back, but we definitely need to continue to have small gatherings, even if we just do Zoom, but talk about these things that are affecting us. Because 2020 should have gave everybody a clear vision of what the government thinks about us, what other state officials thinks about us. It can't be more clear than 2020.
Carol, you're obviously not a family member of Kevin Cooper. How did you come into this campaign?
I was introduced to Kevin by someone who was a friend of his, and we started writing, and then I started visiting him. And, you know, the thing is that Kevin has lost all his court appeals. His case relies now on Governor Newsom granting him an innocence investigation. And Kevin keeps agitating for abolition himself. He writes and speaks about it whenever he can. So that's, you know, and I've been so impressed with his work against the death penalty. So we've become close friends, and, you know, I help him get his words out.
I'm showing now the webpage for Kevin Cooper. And you know, you can see it's really clean and clear. It's very clear. There's, you know, exactly what to do when you see this. Carol, were you part of building this web page, or who does this part for you?
No, other volunteers have done the web page, and cooperation and help from Kevin's very capable attorneys as well. No, I'm a non-technical kind of person.
Got it. So, so I think this is a good example of, you know, somehow Kevin built a team, right? And that's one of the most important things. Who's running Kevin Cooper's campaign, and how does Kevin sort of weigh in on that? And you know, just what's a hard lesson this is the key question. I want to know about those other things, but also what's a hard lesson that you've learned that you could help people not have to repeat as part of this campaign?
Kevin runs the campaign, I would say. There's a small group of dedicated volunteers, very active, and some for many, many years. But he runs it, and he has a good lawyer, and he runs to some extent. He's not a lawyer himself, but he tells the lawyer, he knows his case better than anyone. And that's probably true of all of us here, right? That the person on death row knows everything about the case and all the inconsistencies, all the aspects of frame up from the prosecution and the cops, because it's their lives, so they have to. So he often is giving advice to his lawyer, and he certainly gives advice to us about, his defense. So that's how that works.
My name is Roderick Greene. I'm the brother of Rodney Reed in Anson Manor, Texas death row. My brother was convicted of the murder of Stacy Sykes back in 1996. My brother was in a consensual relationship with Stacy at the time, but she was also engaged to a Giddings police officer. And he found out about it and basically set my brother up for the murder. There was evidence, still today there's DNA evidence that has not been tested. There's all kinds of evidence that and testimony that's still out there. And right now we're waiting on an evidentiary hearing May 17th.
Same thing. How did you, what was going through your family's minds when this first happened? And what, and how did you help break out of that to build the community around your case, around your brother's case?
Well, when this first happened, I'll never forget the day when this first happened. They convicted my brother, and my mother, she stood on the courthouse steps and she says, "Y'all may have convicted my son, but before," she said, "but God got his hands in this. And before this is over, the whole world will know what's going on here in Bastrop." So we were lost for a while, because even at that time, our churches and our communities were making statements like they wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. We had family members that wasn't Rodney Reed supporters at the time because they didn't know the truth. They didn't know
your own family.
Some family members, yeah, they took for granted that if the cops say he did it, he did it. You know what I mean? That kind of mentality, you know what I mean? Without even taking time to find out the truth, the circumstances revolving this case. It took a while, and then finally there was a little organization campaign to end the death penalty, led by Lily Hughes in Austin, Texas. She came and she had heard about it through a article. I can't remember the name of the article right now at this moment, but they were in college and they banded around us, and they invited us to come out and speak and stuff, and then encouraged us to stand up on the truth and tell Rodney's story. And that's what we started doing. And when we started doing that, other people started to get involved, but it took a long time going. But one thing I do know that it takes dedication, it takes persistence, and it takes a lot of love to continue to fight for the truth. And that's something that you got to stand on, no matter where you at in this fight. Stand on the truth, stand on that, you know what I mean? And let nothing discourage you, because you can do all things through God who strengthens you, and you got to believe that. And that's how we got this far, by being patient, and patience is have a good understanding or waiting upon the Lord. And that's what we were doing. We waited upon the Lord to make his move, and have patience, and he works through people. And that's how we've gotten this far, through people. It's not nothing so much we did ourselves, but it's a combination of people coming together and pulling together to make a change and to see the injustice.
So Roderick, I heard you say you started telling a story, and somebody read an article, and suddenly you're getting invitations to come to speak at student groups or whatnot. Are you an organizer? Were you an organizer?
At that time, I was not an organizer.
I would call you an organizer now, but,
yes.
But that's because you've learned, right?
Yeah, that's because I learned. That's because I took time.
When was it that you realized nobody's going to help me if we don't do it ourselves, we're not going to, it's not going to move forward?
Well, to be honest with you, I was visiting Rodney, and we were talking about the things that the other organizations were doing to try to, amplify his case and stuff. And Rodney looked at me and said, Roderick, it's great and it's wonderful that these people are doing these things, but you can do these things as well. And I need you, because you know better than anybody else the circumstances that are in this case. And you have the gift to do it, and the strength to do it. And he encouraged me to do just that. And that's when we started Reed Justice, initiative. But we have been, working with people along those years. But I believe after we really started that, I think things started to really roll a lot faster, a little smoother. And we really started getting support of the people when we stood up for ourselves.
So have you always been a good public speaker?
No, not. If you'd asked me if I would have been a public speaker, 25 years ago, I'd have told you were crazy, because I didn't see that in me. But God has a way of bringing things in you, bring things out of you that's in you that you didn't even know they were there. So that's all the grace of God there. I don't even consider myself a good speaker. I just consider myself a person telling the truth.
On behalf of Rodney, be able to attract some other big names. How did that happen? And how long did it take until you started to hear from people like this? And what advice can you give people who finally, who are desperate to get this kind of attention, but also how do you roll with it once you get it?
Well, that happened by the grace of God. I'm gonna tell you how that happened, because all I can say is we were persistent and keep making noise, keep telling the truth, keep putting it out there. And there was a small little college group. They did the first documentary, State versus Reed. And then we had something to put out there for people to see visually, take home, sit back, soak in. And that really started the wave once that documentary came out. The main thing is to use what you got till you get what you want. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have problems, you know, with different organizations. You don't see eye to eye with them, or they don't see eye to eye with you. But at the end of the day, we got to use what we got till we get what we want. Everything is out there for a reason. And if you use it right, it can be helpful. Don't be too proud to accept help or ask for help, is what I'm trying to say here.
How'd you get the Innocence Project involved?
Well, that came by way of making noise, and the Texas Defenders Project. They got involved, and
That's a lawyers group.
that's a lawyers group out of Texas. And Bryce Benjett took Rodney's case, and then later on he joined the Innocence Project, and he brought Rodney's case with him to the Innocence Project. And
so it's all relationship building, not burning bridges.
Not burning bridges, using what you got, trying to help people, treat people the way you want to be treated, trying to help people, you know what I mean, and get involved. Like you say, it's easy just to talk about your own family story. You know, it's easy just to advocate for them and no one else. But the real challenge is doing for others, not just your family. And that's where you're going to make the difference is. When people see you're not just in this for your family, you're in this for truth, for right, for justice, for the right reasons, then you will get more help. Because it's not, as we said a million times, it's not just about Rodney Reed, because there's 1,000 other Rodney Reeds out there, Julius Jones, you know, Dustin Higgs, all these other people. There's plenty of us out there, and we can't begin to name them all. But what we can do is stand together to abolish the death penalty as a whole, and that's where we can help everybody.
My name is Amy Gordeev. I'm in Ohio, and I am a lead organizer in the campaign for justice for Keith Lamar. So there is absolutely no DNA or forensic evidence linking Keith to any of what he was accused of. Well, almost 3 decades now, Keith has maintained his innocence, and he is scheduled to be executed in 2 years from now. We live in the same town as the Ohio Supermax, and so we were able to begin visiting Keith and getting to know him. You know, I realized that the narrative that was out there about the Lucasville prison uprising didn't kind of tell his story in a way that helped me really understand what his issues were. And so the idea of helping, I'm an English teacher by my profession, and the idea of helping get his story into a book was kind of where it began. Here's this brilliant human being who perfectly is capable of telling what happened, but he just didn't have the, you know, computer equipment, right? So for 8 months we worked, and every day he would write, and then we had a scheduled time every single day pretty much for 8 months, and I caught the words and typed them in my, you know, and we just helped put the book into Condemned. Condemned is Keith's book in his own words, and it really lets everybody understand what happened. And that was really the first step. After that, and I know that not everybody has that ability, you know, but in this particular situation, he was able. And so that was what I saw my role as being, helping him to tell his story. I was not an organizer, but I wanted to try to, you know, get people to understand what had happened. And in the end, really, he would call in and we would put the phone through, you know, a aux cord into a speaker, and he really talked to people. And that's been really the heart and soul of our campaign, has been getting people to know who he is, who Keith Lamar is. And he talks to college classes, he talks to high school students. You know, at one point it meant, let's build a website, you know, and let's get some merchandise. And we are trying to attract a law firm who would take on this case and really dig into the evidence that was withheld. It's there, but the federal attorneys who are representing him have not, in the last 2 or 3 years, made great progress. And it's time is ticking. So in that regard, we are hoping to be able to partner with, somebody who would see how important it is to really be aggressive and fight for actual innocence claim on his behalf. The thing that Antoinette, you mentioned how hard it is to do this work without any money. And because Keith is trying to hire lawyers, raising money is a real priority for our campaign. And so several people said, Amy, I donated to the thing. I donated because change.org is great at soliciting money after signatures are collected. But we were not seeing that money coming into our donation accounts. And, we just didn't know. You kind of learn as you go, right? And so as it turned out, change.org collects the money and you don't get any of it. Your campaign does not receive a penny of it. And Abe, you actually wrote on the Facebook page, I signed it, but I'm not happy with change.org. And I didn't really know what you meant, but it took us some time to realize that thousands of dollars were made by change.org. As all of you know who are doing this work, it's a lot of times about just doing, Keith says this all the time, do that which you are assigned, and you can never hope too much nor dare too much. That's a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote. And that's what it's about, right? Just doing the small assignments. And we can't always predict when it's going to be that everything starts going, wild, like wildfire. But if we do the work, the small things, laying the foundation, setting up the social media, setting up the website, writing the story, whatever those small steps are, it really prepares a campaign like this for when the traffic goes higher and higher. I want to share about how the Twitter storm started. It was that somebody listed several people's names and their links to their petitions. And I think that's a way we can really help support one another. All of these cases are in the public eye. But the truth is, for example, in our case, as we're looking and trying to attract legal representation, it's really not until there's a body of people who've signed on that you sort of have the right to be almost as though, you have to do all of that stuff just to get the right to be heard. And it's free, and it's a way that we can all help everybody get the signers onto their petition to kind of share each other's names. And I intend to do that with all of you here today. And I hope you'll do the same for us. And that way our supporters believe in this stuff. And in that way, we can grow our individual petitions.
I looked into my brother's case. I found all kinds of evidence, but that's not what I really had to do. I had to go in and investigate the police officers, each one individually. I had to investigate the lawyers, each one individually. And I investigated the judges, each one individually. So I had documents on everybody.
What did it take you, though, to get to people helping?
Well, what I did, I would always set up a meeting. I couldn't get any help from that sentencing county, which was Crawford County. Mm-hmm. So what I did, I lived in Stark County. So I was play acting. My brother, I got a job in a local halfway house, and they started showing me how the law works. And my brother became my client. So I had a case, I had a file and everything. And I represented him. So I met with the mayor and I sat down and I said, well, why would you meet with the mayor? He's my mayor. He should understand what I'm going through, what the law is. I met with the prosecuting attorney. I met with the public defender's office. I'm meeting with city.
This took time.
Yes, it took a lot of time.
And what was the kind of reactions that you received?
Great reactions, because most of them were surprised that I would come to them and challenge their jobs.
So just opening doors by knocking on them and going in.
Yes.
Were you afraid to do that?
Yes.
How did you overcome that fear?
Love overcame all my fears. Everywhere I went, that phone call, I'm shaking, knocking on that door, I'm shaking, but if I sit still, I'm shaking too. So I just couldn't sit still. I was going crazy, and things just kept pushing me in these directions. But as I voted for this mayor, as I voted for this prosecutor, and again, not in my home county, I had to find a friendly county, and they were advising me, well, Charles, you might need to do this, you might need to do that. And then once I got the job, these people became my constituents and colleagues. So I worked with them, and I became, instead of Charles Keith, I became Mr. Keith. And I had access to all kinds of information, and going to the events, going to dinners, going to different awards and stuff. They got to seeing me, and it was almost like I was one of the team.
Charles, how did you get this major celebrity to get involved in your campaign?
Somebody had called me and says, hey, I told your story to a crime writer. So we talked to that crime writer, and then she says, well, you know, it'd be nice if we could have Kim. I says, well, that's what we need to have. She said, well, Kim lives next door. I said, we got to have her. She says, well, I don't know if I want to go over there. I know you don't want to go over there, but go over there for me. So I said, just give her what I sent you. If it convinced you, it should move her. So she went over there, she left the documents with Kim, and she went home. I am part of my brother's legal team, so I know every move the attorneys make. Some things attorneys told me not to do. Well, legally as an attorney, you guys may or may not do it, but I'm not an attorney. I'm my brother's brother. So there's some things that I did against the attorney's wishes. And I did that because I knew it would benefit my brother. It would benefit our cause.
Have you done anything that's backfired and hurt?
No. How? He's already on death row.
That's why I want to actually make sure everybody's clear that Charles Keith is now on the staff of Death Penalty Action. And his role, Charles, your role, as we've discussed, is being the connection for people with families in prison, whether guilty or innocent. If you get in touch with us, we're going to connect you with Charles, and he's going to be able to help us find the resources and build a community where we can support each other. And you can also find, I mean, we're not going to be able, right now, I can't say that we'll be a service provider, but we want to be a hub.